Messy and masterful. In this podcast, we speak about the success of people who have achieved, built, or done something amazing, special, remarkable, noteworthy, and/or fabulous. Think of presidents, doctors, chefs, architects, filmmakers, writers, philosophers, CEOs, journalists, and the list goes on of people who've had a genuine impact on this world. But rather than underlining their career victories, we speak about the challenges they needed to overcome to actually get there. In each episode, we discuss 3 of such challenges, obstacles, difficulties, and/or hurdles with our guest, putting the messy of their lives next to the masterful. A very warm welcome to you. My name is Aldo, and I'm so happy you could make it. So sit back, relax, and download the podcast here.
When you first started out, you've got 2 people, maybe a small loan or whatever else it might be, or a few quid that you've put into it yourself. You've got an idea, and if all that goes pop, you've not really lost anything. Whereas I think as you get a little bit further on and you can see the team around you and the people to some degree that you're responsible for, you can see the value that's built in the company. You can see the customers who are using the software or drinking the drink or whatever else it might be. When you do then get to that point and think, actually, there is something tangible to lose now, the fear of the loss is sometimes stronger than the desire for the win.
Hello, very happy you could make it. Very excited you have chosen to listen to another episode of Messy and Masterful. And this one is about serial entrepreneurship. You have entrepreneurship on one hand, and then you have serial entrepreneurship on the other. And serial entrepreneurship for me is basically that once you get the gist of it, the gist of starting your own company, once you basically become possessed with starting your own thing, then unfortunately or fortunately, you can't stop anymore. And my next guest, a great guy named Seb Francis, he's a great example of that. So I've known Seb for quite a while. He's quite an entrepreneurial guy, an entrepreneurial spirit. He started a edtech company called Titus Learning a while back, and that company is growing and flourishing in its own way. And whilst doing that, he also started a tequila brand. So that's why this episode is dubbed the Tequila Maker, because I thought that's just such a special thing and such a different thing also to start. And we also talk about how different these choices, these entrepreneurial choices of Seb are. So have a listen. It's of course a conversation about the turbulent journey in starting a company. And also I hope that it'll give you some pointers about what does and what doesn't work if you're seeking to start your own business. So with that, please enjoy episode 67, Seb Francis, the Tequila Maker. Yes, and what a wonderful day it is. It is July, and July 12th to be exact. And I have someone on that I've known for quite a while already, that I bump into every now and then, specifically when it comes to starting companies, growing companies, also traveling all over the world. I have here on my podcast the one and only Seb Francis. Hi, Seb. How are you?
I'm very good, Aldo. Thank you very much for having me. How are you getting on?
Yeah, and getting on nicely. I'm very happy you could make it. And actually, in a previous life, Seb, you also had a podcast. You were actually the person who introduced the idea of podcasting to me, because you created a podcast called Startup Secrets. And you spoke to loads of entrepreneurs about their ideas, which I thought was great. And I listened to it. Unfortunately, you've moved on from that because you're doing loads of great other stuff. And as we're going to discuss, you're quite a busy man. But it always stuck with me, kind of the way you interview, but also your energy in taking on those new ideas. So I was very impatient to have you on, and I'm very happy you could make it. For those of you who do not know you, Seb, you are the founder of Titus, which is a great education or an edtech product that's growing quite a bit, that's doing very well. And then at the same time, because you just couldn't help yourself, you also started a wonderful tequila brand by the name of Asien. The H is silent, isn't it?
The H
Asien.
is silent.
The
Well
H
done,
is,
well
yeah.
done, Aldo. You've done
Yeah,
your research.
exactly. The Asien. Yeah, I mean, I wanted to talk about you as an entrepreneur because I think you're quite an inspiring personality. But yeah, so sorry, before I ask 17,000 questions in one go, I just wanted to go back to the very beginning. I'm just going to take you to when we met. That was in China. I
Yes,
don't know if you remember. We were
I
both
do.
part of a delegation, a UK delegation, I believe. I think we were joined by the commerce minister at that time.
Yeah.
There was like an event there, and you were working on Titus. Tell me a little bit about Titus and what it does in a nutshell.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think we did we do Beijing and Shanghai, if memory serves correct, with the Department for International Trade or
Yeah, that was
UKTI,
it.
as I think
Yeah.
it might have been at the time. Yeah, I remember it was because I would have I think it'd have been 24, 25 when we did that. So it was kind of like both of us kind of the young ones in a room of significantly older people presenting in China. But yeah, so it will be our 10th birthday this December. So the decade has kind of whizzed past really quickly, and obviously in a much different position now to where we were a few years ago, let alone kind of 9-10 years ago. And really we'd set out to provide software solutions at the time to international schools, hence the reason we were in China, and that was to assist with all of their online teaching and learning. And then as the years went by, we became a Moodle partner, which Moodle is an open source software used by millions and millions of people around the globe for online teaching and learning. And after that point of getting our Moodle partnership, we quite quickly started working with corporates, workplace learning, and made that shift from education to workplace. And then with events that have happened thereafter, and in particular COVID being the big one, things for us have just absolutely rocketed. So growth has been kind of crazy in terms of new customers, in terms of current customers using the software significantly more and putting a lot more load through it. And people, just as we're doing this podcast, and I can't remember if we did, I think we did 2 podcasts. I don't know if we did them both remotely or if we did one of them in person, but you've just got this shift to a lot of things now being online, be it teaching and learning or upskilling and learning and development for corporates like we do, whether it's meetings, whether it's webinars, which we've just been running, and whatever else. But everything you find is shifting online. And I think there's a place for both things. That physical interaction, that social interaction, I think is hugely important, but we've all seen the efficiencies that you get through online in whatever form it might be. So over the past few years in particular, the team's jumped up. So we're up to just over 40 staff. We work across a good 40 odd countries, maybe about 250, 300 clients. And some of those clients from the kind of fairly humble beginnings now working with the likes of Superdry, Network Rail, Dermalogica, CNN, and a range of other kind of household names, which we're really pleased with. And it feels like a very long time ago you were sat in the bedroom of your mum's house kind of tapping away on your computer and trying to convince schools to work with you. So yeah, it's been a really good run. The business day to day is massively different, and I'm sure we'll get into it, than it was previously. And I think there's pros and cons to that for me individually, and Mike, who's the other co-founder, and also for the team as well. So it's constant kind of challenge, I would say, in terms of how do you keep things around culture, how do you keep things in terms of enjoyment and satisfaction and that family feel that is very easy to kind of get in the early days, but as you do get larger, and there's still hopefully plenty more growth ahead of us, but as you do get larger, how do you retain that whilst providing a really good service to your clients? So yeah, in a nutshell, that's Titus and kind of where we are.
Before we discuss growth, because before hitting record here, like any other guest, you sent 3 challenges, and growth is one of them. Take me back to 10 years ago when you started this. Why did you start Titus? What was your personal reason for getting into this?
So I think there's what classes like commercial reasons and personal reasons. And I think if we start with the personal ones, because that's what you mentioned. So I'd say I've probably always naturally been fairly entrepreneurial in terms of whether it's making money, adding value. Back in school days, it would be the usual, had a tuck shop, ran parties, but constantly buying and selling stuff. That's what my thing was. And I think that just kind of, you do the same now, but just on a much bigger scale. It's get something for X, add some value, sell it for Y, so on and so forth, and wrap a really good service around that. And personally, I think it was scratching that itch of wanting to do that and not necessarily being in a position within another organisation to do that. Now you do get a lot more organisations promoting entrepreneurship and that entrepreneurial thinking within an organisation, but where I was at least previously before, you didn't necessarily get the same chance or autonomy to do that kind of thing. So I think being able to scratch the entrepreneurial itch and was always a big thing.
Did you because you were 24, you were younger when you started it. So were you fresh out of school when you started Titus, or when did you?
Yeah, not far off.
Not far
so
off,
I was
yeah.
22. We started. So I'd gone through A-levels in the UK, done a little bit of university. And when I say a little bit, I mean a real little bit. It was about 3 months. And then pretty much went for freshers. Went for freshers, a few lectures, drank a lot of beer and then left. So that was about it. But then went into the world of work then. And I think the job I was doing at the time, I did, although the bits I've just mentioned about entrepreneurial way of thinking, I enjoyed the job. It was sales related, managed to progress and ultimately as well, I won't shy away from the fact I have always been money motivated, and the fact I was starting to earn some okay money, I was looking at what the pros and cons of either going back to university, sticking in work. And after a few years there, that's when it came to the point of thinking, how do you scratch the entrepreneurial itch? How can we do something better than where we were previously? And that was the big thing for us, was we saw things that we were frustrated with, and I'd say we, myself and Mike, didn't necessarily have the autonomy to change those, and it was a case of putting our money where our mouth was and backing ourselves to be able to do that better. And at the time, and this has got similarities to the Tequila company, which we'll talk about as well, but is looking at new and or growing areas of the market. So at the time for Titus, international schools was a vastly growing area. When we come on to talk about ASEAN and the Tequila is massively growing. So I think looking at those areas where there is growth, there is increased interest within that's an important thing as well. So, and tied in with that, you've got, I think, naturally people who do run their own business. You've got that kind of rule breaking, chuck the rule book out the window kind of attitude where you're constantly questioning why is something built a particular way? Why is something done a particular way? So to have control, with sound too cliche, but like control of your own destiny, the timings you work around, where you work, how you work, there's a natural attractiveness to that as well. So a number of things, both from a commercial perspective and to scratch a few personal itches as well.
Well, nice. You come across as someone who learns by doing, clearly. So kind of, just dive into the deep and make sure you swim.
Usually make some mistakes, nearly drown, but that's hopefully fine. Resurface.
But that's fine. And and that's also the energy you get from you. When you meet you, is you're on the go. You want to make it work. You're committed to it. And that's definitely a great thing. Rather than being too theoretical about it all, it's kind of looking where's the opportunity and how do you bring it together. Yeah, as your first challenge, indeed, you mentioned growth because, well, congrats on, of course, the success of Titus. So going from it being a kind of a product for teaching and learning specifically for schools, and in the case of Titus, way back when for international schools, you grew into also the corporate space, and that brought along loads more commercial opportunities. So that's good, and lots more growth. It sounds to me like a curse and a blessing. Right, and that's why maybe you've written it down as a challenge. Could you tell me why?
I think you've summarised it fairly well there. So it's interesting because when you start out, all you ever want to do is get to that point that you've set your mind on. Be that a number of customers, a number of staff, the product you've developed or the service you're offering, the countries within which you work, the revenue, the profits, whatever it might be. You're looking at that goal and you're constantly pushing towards it. And then I think when you get into it, or when you get there, or thereabouts where you thought you would be, it's kind of a weird feeling. And I compare it a little bit to when you're a child and you look up to adults and you think, I can't wait to be grown up. And yes, there are plenty of really good things about being an adult and being grown up, but as we well know, you've got all of the stresses that come with that. You've got the responsibility that comes with that. You've got whatever else might be tied around it. And you get to being an adult and you think, do you know what? It would be quite nice to be a kid for the day. And it's that same kind of feeling. So when we started out, we did have all of those targets I just mentioned. Where do we want to get to from a revenue and a growth perspective, the staff, the customers we're working with, and you do, again, without being too cliche, you do realize the further on you get, it is very much about that journey piece and enjoying those steps along the way, which I think we did a relatively good job of doing, and celebrating success along the way and the opportunities that we got, kind of not taking them for granted or trying not to take them for granted too much. And then ultimately the ways of working just changed significantly. So when you start out, and it started out with, like I said, myself and Mike both working in our back bedrooms, and got another member of staff, get a small office, slightly bigger, and you grow from there. And then as you start working with more people internally, move away from a completely flat structure and start to get the management team in, you start to do things like ISO and get all your accreditations and that kind of stuff. And then ultimately working with larger companies who expect a level of governance, then the way that we have to work as individuals changes hugely as well. And I think, again, the type of person who is likely to start a company and look at that startup grind and that disruptive, innovative type of approach to things, to then get to a position where you do need much more of this framework around you, that in itself can be a challenge. Yeah. And when you talk about the gift and the curse, you've got the gift of you've got to where you wanted to get, or perhaps beyond there. You have got the positive other things that come with that, the success in however you measure that. And you're doing some really impactful things for a lot of people. There's a few million people who use our software, and we help them day in, day out with their jobs, with something social related, with supporting others, with recovering from whatever it might be. There's a whole host of people we impact, and all of that kind of stuff is the gift of it. The curse of it is finding yourself working in a way that you either wouldn't naturally do or significantly different to what you did previously. And I think for us, we've then had to look at, okay, well, we might not work in this way, but how can we get other people around us who do naturally work in this way, and ultimately who can do things better than we can do? And as soon as we started recruiting, that was kind of the number one thing we were looking for. It wasn't a case of we need to be the smartest in the room, we need to be the best at XYZ. It's looking at who can you bring in who can do the job. So I think when you talk about the gift and the curse, the gift is that side of getting to the place that you wanted to be at, or a little bit beyond that perhaps. And we've touched on some of the things there. So it could be, like I said, the staff and the team around you who you're working with, the customers, be that the number of customers, the type of customers. And for us, we do focus very much a lot at Titus around, when we look at our vision, it's having a positive impact on people and empowering them through learning. That is broadly what we're looking to do. So using our software, using our partners, using our content to push out to people who might be surgeons who use that to save someone's life the next day, or to work with charities wherever they may be based, or to work with someone with Network Rail, as I kind of mentioned, as one of our customers. So safety on the tracks and just the day-to-day running up and down of the country of trains. Now, I don't want to be blamed for any late trains in the UK because there are plenty of them, but you do get that impact, which is a gift of it. And then, as I said, there's also the gift of success and however you measure that. So that might be your status, that might be the financial freedom that comes with it, or whatever else that is. But that side is certainly the gift of it. Say the curse, it might be the wrong word to use, but the challenge on the other side of that is working in a different way to how you might naturally work as someone who is entrepreneurial. And the entrepreneurial side of me wants to find a problem, come up with some kind of solution, figure out a way to make or create value from that, and go again. That's naturally, I think, what I kind of buzz off, and getting something from an ideation phase through to either having something physical, I'll do a little ASEAN bit there that we will touch on, or having something from a service perspective, but an offering. So that's naturally where I kind of get my kicks. And I think going through that process, when you do have more governance and everything wrapped around it, it can be trickier. So we very much looked at how can we pull other people into the business who work in an opposite way to how we do, really. So people who are more in line with things like governance and process and naturally kind of people management, that kind of stuff. Look at the companies they've worked at that might be a few steps ahead, if not a lot of steps ahead of us on their journey, so they can bring their learnings and kind of drag us out of the startup phase to some degree, but also whilst we try our best to retain the culture, the fun, the staff satisfaction, the general ethos and feeling and vibe within the organisation as well. So it is an interesting one. I think ultimately you're not going to get around that challenge on your own. When we talk about growth and how that impacts you as an individual, there's people you need to pull around. There's an understanding and an acceptance at some point as well, where you've kind of got to wave goodbye to that previous chapter. And as we will come on to with ASEAN as well, it's allowed us through the growth for me to be able to split my time a little bit between two different projects. Now, that in itself is a balancing act, and we'll come on to that in a little while. But also what other things outside of your core day-to-day. And for me, that was Titus for a very long time, and still is Titus alongside other things. But outside of that, what other things can you do to scratch the itch that's there and always probably
that's clearly there? Yeah. I'm just wondering, in this trajectory, because Titus is a success story, that's not to say that you didn't encounter any problems or kind of any challenges. Yeah, this is a podcast about challenges. What's your strategy when you kind of hit a wall? Do you have any? Do you have any coping mechanisms? Like, okay, this wall's obviously not going to go away. What do I do?
I think, so first and foremost, and I mentioned him a couple of times, so Mike, who's the other co-founder, I'd like to think he feels the same on his side as well, but both very fortunate, I think, to have one another to bounce things off. So my girlfriend runs her own company as well. She does that as a sole founder, and she will often chat to me about bits on an evening and chat to other people around her, but no one is in that situation with her, using that as an example. Now with myself and Mike, we're going through things together, and we've both got different ways of approaching things, both got different skill sets, and having that like dynamic relationship is very helpful. So I think first and foremost, having the two of us, and it's not to say that people shouldn't or can't build and grow successful companies as a sole founder, but that has been hugely useful and hugely helpful. And you know immediately that you don't have to deal with it on your own. Sometimes there are things that I will say, look, I've got this, don't worry about it. Mike will say the same, but that's helped massively over the years. And I think it'd be unfair not to kind of highlight that first and foremost. I think in terms of how do I deal with it, to answer your question, ultimately it's trying not to, is that phrase of kind of worry about the things you can control, don't worry about the things that you can't control. So it's trying to get to the root cause of whatever the issue or the challenge may be. It's starting to throw ideas around and strategize around how that can be solved. It's ultimately, whether it's Mike or someone else, it's getting feedback from other people. And again, it's back to this thing of there's not anyone really. There's a lot of people who go, I'm self-made, or I've done it all on my own, which I think is bollocks. So we'll start lightly. But yeah, I think that's it's not the case. You're always leaning on other people, other experts, people who've been there and done it, people who've done something similar but might be in a completely different sector or different walk of life. But ultimately leaning on other people. And then ultimately when it comes to decision time, I think it's trying to collate all of the findings you've got, whether that's from things from yourself, things from within the business, outside of the business, and analysing that. But then ultimately I'm one of those who just kind of trusts the gut quite a lot. And if something feels a particular way, unless the data is screaming at me to say, go this other direction, or a number of people, usually internally, are saying, we should really be going this way. So if my gut is saying one thing, the whole management team and Mike are saying another one, at times like that, you think, actually, let's go with the majority perhaps, unless the feeling is so strong. So I think, leaning on the co-founder, hugely helpful. Worrying about the stuff you can control, trying to get to the root cause, and chucking and kind of no idea is stupid or no suggested solution is stupid, considering all the options, seeking counsel internally and externally, and then trusting your gut and leaning on the data when it comes to decision-making time.
You're not mentioning it, but you're showcasing it actually, because staying resilient, right? Was there at any point did you ever think, I'm going to pull the plug?
Never pulled the plug, but there've certainly been times where it's just tough. It's very tough. It's sometimes you do a hell of a lot of work and then the results don't come quickly enough, or perhaps not as big as you would expect. There's challenges, or kind of very specific challenges, where you think, even though I've made it sound simple of how to address challenges and overcome them, there's somewhere you sat there. It's not a 30-minute conversation. It's something that goes on for weeks, months, longer in certain cases, and still trying to find the right way. And ultimately it comes a lot back to enjoyment and satisfaction. And I do enjoy problem solving, but if you are constantly problem solving or constantly fighting fires, it can get a little bit tiring. So there's never been a time where it's like, I'm going to pull the plug and getting close to it. Again, I think having a co-founder helps with that, because I might be down here, but Mike might be up there, or vice versa. You can back and help one another. And ultimately, as you do get larger, it's more than just yourself that you're thinking about. There's, like I said, about 40 odd people who work with us. That's X number of salaries, X number of families off the back of that. There's X number of customers and users at the other end. So it becomes quite quickly significantly bigger than one or two individuals. So never considered pulling the plug, but without a doubt been some tougher times as well.
I recognize it because in my first entrepreneurial rodeo, which is Teach Pitch, I was the only founder. And it's true that even though you're not really alone, you do feel alone, right? Because you're the only one in that boat, essentially. Now, having said that, there are many other founders, right, who might not be dealing with the exact same product, but they are dealing with that journey, right? And I remember that's also, I think, one of the reasons you started Startup Secrets as well, for people to share that wisdom, right? So I felt less alone because of it, because you can share ideas and because you can look at each other and say, look, here's a problem I'm struggling with, and here's what I'm dealing with. My second venture I'm doing with 4 other founders. And I have to say that it is indeed a lot more pleasant, because exactly as you say, it's a shared burden. If there's a problem, you don't panic immediately, panic less, because you know, there's still this conversation to be had among founders. And, you know, these clever guys as well. So they might have a solution that you do not see yet, right? So it offers new opportunities. And as you say, like, they also have different skill sets. So therefore, they would look at a problem differently than you do. So, yeah, I mean, I think that advocates for, if you start something, it's always good to be, if you can, do it with someone by your side. And that is very helpful. Thanks for sharing that, Seb. Let's go to your next challenge, which is basically, and you've already hinted, I think you've already answered why you started ASEAN, because you said, I like the ideation phase. I like to bring something from 0 to 1, or from 0 to something.
Yeah.
Is that also why you started this tequila brand?
Yeah, I think it is to some degree. So I'd always had this desire, and I don't know what. So I've always been quite into food and drink, and then I've always had this desire to start. I didn't know what it would be at the time, but an alcohol brand. That was it. That I thought, there's at some point in my life, my plan was to travel the world, drink lots of alcohol, which sounds like quite a drink. I mean, drink in moderation.
What a dream!
Drink lots of alcohol. But really, that's what. Yeah, well, wherever it might be, Aldo, I'm easy. Okay. I'm easy. But try, and I think it's partly like a cultural thing as well. So if I ever travel, and like yourself, been fairly fortunate to get to travel to a few places that others usually wouldn't, and part of that's mostly that's through work, so whether in Southeast Asia or South America or places in Europe, Western, Eastern, wherever it might be, is trying to get stuck into the local culture. So particular cuisines that are kind of locally grown and all the rest of it, but then also with the drinks and what are the cocktails, what are the spirits, what are the wines from that particular region. So the idea was to go around, try a range of different wines, spirits, beers, whatever it might be, decide on a favourite one of those that kind of stuck out for me, head back home, wherever home might be at that time, and create my own brand. So that was always something I'd had in my head, and I found a picture the other day actually from quite a lot of years ago, and my friend and I on, I think it was Boxing Day, came to the office and started writing down ideas, and in the centre of the board there was start an alcohol brand, and then I'd kind of forgotten about it a little bit, and then a few years later here we are with our ASEAN ready to go and on sale. So in terms of when we actually started, so Jordan, again, I've done this with another co-founder, Jordan, who's a friend I went to school with. We were having a chat in his kitchen at some early hours time in the morning after a few drinks, and he'd had a similar-ish idea around doing something in the premium alcohol space, proposed an idea that he had at the time, and we really took that and then evolved it all the way through from what started out life as a class as like a ready-to-drink shooter through to fully fledged tequila brand, flavoured tequila, and various other bits with it. So I think the tequila and the drink side specifically is something that I'd always wanted to do. I do think that the idea of starting something new, that is and probably will always be there. So even through the years we've done Titus, like I said, I've done the podcast, I've done some other bits with friends, done some little bits of consulting, and always just been interested in other ideas as well. And yeah, I'm not quite sure why, but I think I seem to enjoy the pressure of having a lot on and doing multiple things at once as well. I think I can get bored quite easily. So having other things to focus on, I think, then makes me better within all of the things that I do, because you've got different things stimulating your mind. So yeah, that's kind of where it came from. Conversation with Jordan. I'll tell you about the process of how we physically got it started, but then always the kind of food and drink stuff interests me, and it's a great industry, and it's different to tech and Titus in so many ways as well. So with Titus, it is business to business. It is predominantly service based. There is quite a bit of customization per client, whereas this is business to consumer. It is a product, and and that's what I've quite liked the idea of, is create a product and people either buy it or they don't. Like, you can iterate it, you can tweak it, you want to constantly improve it, but it's like, there it is. If you want it, cool. If you don't, that's fine. But that idea of not having to constantly customize as well is quite a nice feeling.
Yeah, that's I never thought about that, but that's indeed true. Like, the product is physical. It's there. You either buy it or you don't. And with technology, it's often, we want it, but this button needs to go there, or that needs to be able to do that, or when in which version it will do this and whatever. So there's a lot more catering to the needs of your client, which, as you indicated before, is an endless conversation often, right? So it's exactly, it's a different trajectory. I wanted to ask what it is about tequila other than alcohol. Like, is it, maybe from a market perspective, is tequila up and coming, or do you have a specific place in your heart for tequila, or why the tequila?
So I think a few reasons, really. So going back to when we got started, I liked to, and historically, and still kind of today, like, tequila's known as a drink that's a shot, your salt and your lime, and that's one of the things that we, amongst other tequila producers as well, in fact, are trying to change. So as opposed to it being a shot, it should be something that's drunk with a mixer, it's in a cocktail, you sip it neat, you have it with ice, etc., etc. But historically, it's always been a shot. Now, if we were out on a night out and someone said, let's get some tequila shots, I would always enjoy them, even though the quality of tequila you're having at the time is not all that cracking, and you're doing it out of a little plastic shot glass, you're usually licking salt off your hand. All that still, I would still quite like tequila. Jordan, on the flip side, despised tequila. So I think the challenge in that, and finding other Jordans, basically, and trying to convert them, I think that challenge was something that I really enjoyed. And I think Jordan, once we'd come up with a profile and a liquid where he tried it and he went, shit, that's tequila, or that's good tequila. And when we got out to Mexico chatting with the distilleries, the view, in particular in the UK, we have of tequila is so narrow. It's kind of everything that I described previously. When you get to Mexico and you see the range of what they've got, it's huge. We've got a pineapple infused one, which is 100% agave tequila, so super high quality, infused with pineapple. So it just makes it a little bit easier for those people who don't like tequila to get on board with it. And we talk about your tequila story rewritten. So it's all about, everyone's kind of got a tequila story where they drank too much and either threw it up or kissed the wrong person or couldn't find their way home or woke up the next morning feeling horrendous or whatever it might be.
Wreckage drink, right? Yeah.
So everyone's got a bit of a tequila story, and it's like, how can we rewrite that and reintroduce them to it? So that was it in terms of, I think, the challenge, and we'd seen what good quality tequila can look like and could be like. So that we felt was an opportunity, similar to what I'd mentioned about the international school sector for Titus. And we saw growth there. The tequila is currently, and has been for quite a little while now, the fastest growing spirit within the UK and globally. I think that's kind of bolstered now by celebrity-backed brands, and you've got The Rock, you've got Diddy, you've got the chaps from Breaking Bad, Bryan Cranston and Aaron something or other. They're doing a mezcal, and plenty of others as well. You're kind of seeing them pop up all the time. So that's helping to a degree, and we're looking at it from a perspective of a rising tide lifts all ships, as opposed to being concerned about the celebrity-endorsed tequila or any other spirit out there as well. And I think in the UK, which is obviously where we're based and focusing initially, there's a huge opportunity there as well, because it does fall quite a few years behind the States, obviously behind Mexico, where they've been drinking it for since the break of dawn. So we've got an opportunity there in the UK as well, and then hopefully look at the international side in future. So I think, personal I liked it. I knew that a lot of other people didn't, could have changed their mind. And then also just the tequila growth was huge, and there was a good opportunity there to kind of reintroduce it to people.
What I like about it is the international vibe it gives me. It's such an otherworldly drink, right? And I'm here in the northeast of Scotland. It's as far away from tequila as you can get from those Mexican distilleries, right? So it automatically makes you dream a little and makes you, as you say, long for the sunshine and kind of, those things. So the drink has that type of magic, which I think, specifically in the UK could be very beneficial to you, right? It's kind of, has a story in and of itself. Is it also something that you use as a mixer? Does the spirit go with anything? Like, I'm not an expert at all. Is it something you can only drink pure, or is it often also mixed into other drinks?
Yeah, so if you go to Mexico, which we've been fortunate enough to do quite a few times now. So for it to be tequila, and especially 100% agave tequila, it's all got to be produced, bottled, labeled, everything in Mexico, and more specifically in 5 states within Mexico. And Jalisco is the main one for that. And there's a town called Tequila in the state of Jalisco. So that's where our distillery is, just outside the town of Tequila. If you're drinking tequila in Mexico, often you see it sipped. That might be a Blanco tequila, which is no aging. It could be a Reposado or an Añejo tequila, which has got some aging for the Reposado and a bit more for the Añejo, typically over a year. And you would less so see people mixing it, but you would see people sipping it. Sometimes that might be alongside the dinner, might be an after dinner drink, but it's just consumed in such a way as Europeans would consume beer or wine. That's how it's consumed in Mexico.
Okay.
What we are seeing an increase of in the UK, and I think a little bit in the States as well, is a little bit more of the tequila and soda, tequila and tonic. We mix our pineapple tequila with ginger ale, which goes exceptionally well. We mix our Blanco tequila with Mexican lime soda. So all of the spirit and mixer drinks, be that a rum and coke, whiskey and coke, vodka, orange, whatever it might be, tequila can fit in that category of drinks. But I think, again, it's back to that re-education piece. People naturally just think of it as a shot, and typically as a shot that they think doesn't taste all that nice either. So it's kind of wrong on 2 parts there. 1, it doesn't taste very nice. You've probably not got the right tequila. 2, if you're only shooting it, then you're missing out on a trick, because as a long drink, it's perfect. And then obviously as well, as a cocktail, it works really well. The growth and kind of interest in margaritas generally, as well as a whole other load of tequila cocktails is helping it as well. But certainly what we'd like to see is for it to be sitting alongside the gin and tonics of the world, or sitting alongside some of the other cocktails that you might see. And ideally, like if I drink it at home, I tend to have it neat. And whether that's the Blanco or the Añejo, I love it either neat or on the rocks. And again, if you are a spirit drinker, and our Añejo is aged in bourbon barrels, you get that kind of whiskey-esque vibe to it. Tequila is also a really good drink to jump on board with.
What does Asien mean?
So first of all, foremost, it's a made-up word. It's like tango, it's like Fanta or whatever else you want to choose. It's a made-up word, but with various links as to why we chose it. So the home at the center of the agave farm, where you would harvest the agave to create tequila, that would be referred to as the hacienda, home in Spanish. It's a slight nod to a famous nightlife institution in the UK, again called Hacienda. So we wanted that hacienda, and those are the 2 things we were looking at, with the links to the agave farms and the link to nightlife. And you probably can't see it on the camera, but down the side is a spirit of the night. So that's one of the kind of like taglines that we've got. So we wanted that nightlife feel. We wanted the nod to tradition. But then as we kept going out to Mexico and we took the bottle, so the 100 is in reference to 100 in Spanish. So 100% agave is kind of known as one of the higher quality types of tequila. So if you've got 100% agave, you've used a particular agave plant, the Blue Weber, to create it, and therefore you should end up with a smoother, nicer, more natural flavored or natural feeling tequila. So the CN kind of nods to 100, and there's a few other bits that tie into that. So it's all about nightlife, nod to tradition, good quality booze.
Nice.
And
we've gone off track a little bit.
The handle was free.
Exactly. Well, that's important as well. Yeah, definitely. But we've gone a little bit off track because, definitely this is amazing, and congrats on ASEAN and all the things you've achieved thus far. But as your challenge, you indicated that sometimes you struggle doing multiple projects. Earlier you said, like, listen, I thrive when I'm busy, and I need to have a lot on to kind of, be productive. But the downside of that is that sometimes you feel a little too thinly spread. Tell me about
Yeah.
that feeling.
Yeah, no, I'd mentioned it to you, but it's all very fair what you've said there. So when we first started with ASEAN, it was very much moonlighting. So I would do Titus as the day job, evenings and weekends. Myself and John would get together, work on ASEAN, and that kind of worked fine. You were sacrificing your social stuff as opposed to anything else through the day. So that was not too hard. It was enjoyable, early stage, ideation, all the rest of it. We different to Titus, because at Titus we're just growing organically from day one through customer acquisition. With ASEAN, we took some funding. So we did kind of like a seed round, friends and family / network, and raised 500,000 mainly to get the product off the ground. So very expensive to get stuff going. You've got your staff to pull in, you've got your marketing, etc., etc. And I think from that point onwards, once we've received the funds, things changed overnight, where rather than it being Titus and then a new idea, it was very quickly Titus and ASEAN into kind of fully fledged businesses that you're running. You've got a good return that you want to get for the investors. You need to put the money to work. Each month that goes by, any fixed costs that you've got are still going out. So you need to be trying to get that income back in as soon as possible. And then Titus is running alongside it. So I think it's probably caught me off guard a little bit in terms of how tough it is doing the two things. And it's probably more so just the actual resource you've got as an individual to do it. I think switching mentally between the two, I find relatively easy. So after this conversation, I'm going to be chatting with somebody new who's just joined us at Titus and doing a company introduction. After that, I'm going into a conversation with some investors at ASEAN. So I can bounce between stuff mentally quite easily, but it's more so just the time you have and trying to create time to not just be reactive on both sides, which I think, if I'm honest to myself, I probably was for a while, where you kind of reactively dealing with stuff with Titus, reactively dealing with stuff with ASEAN, but not able to jump into the proactive stuff, which is really where the magic happens. So that has been a challenge. I think, again, I'd kind of referenced the people around you when we talked about growth previous, and I think the same is true to some degree with this problem, is who can you pull in to help you do stuff, trying not to take on absolutely everything yourself, and delegating. I think people are either naturally quite good at it or not at all. And I think it took me quite a while to get better at delegating. I think I'm secretly a bit, well, maybe not so secret to everyone else, but a bit of a control freak and kind of want eyes on everything. And you've got to learn to just relinquish that control. And even if something goes out 98% to the level as you might have wanted it to go out, it's better off having two things go out 98% than nothing going out at all, because you never get into that 100%. So trying to relinquish control a little bit, delegate, give people autonomy, give people responsibility. I think that helps huge. And then really just being a bit more militant with your time and prioritizing and being as efficient as possible and as structured as possible, which it doesn't always work like that's the absolute ideal. And if you can do that for 3 out of the 5 days a week, then you might be doing okay. But if you can kind of keep that as a target at the very least, it does tend to help. And just constantly looking back and reassessing, tweaking, getting feedback from others about how present you are with various bits you're working on, and go from there. And I've got a wonderful PA, Jan, who keeps me in check as well, which certainly helps a lot.
Good. Yeah, it's good to have the right people around you. And then, I mean, we haven't even addressed that, but there's also a girlfriend, right? There's also your private life. It's like that's non-existent. Because when you said from reactive to proactive, my daughter is 4 years old now, but in her early years, that's your time, right? It's kind of, any minute left, you're with that little kid. At least I was, and so is my wife. So now, luckily, she's a bit older, but I do recognize that, and that takes energy as well, right? I think sometimes what the feeling that I get with the multiple projects is, you're right, I also thrive in a very active setting. I like to be busy. I perform better with both companies because I have both things doing, and then on top of that, the podcast. But I sometimes notice, like, am I doing justice to the company by doing it like this, right? If I know I'm too quick about it, or if I feel I should do more. Which is why I'm very pleased that there's a new CEO in town for TeachPitch. So I
Yeah.
don't have to do the day-to-day necessarily. There's someone else looking at that with me. Because you need to set your priorities straight at some point, just
You
to
do,
stay
yeah.
proactive. Because you're right in saying that's where the magic happens.
Yeah, definitely. And back to that social piece, it's always a tricky one. And like I say, I know exactly how I function at my optimum, but do I always do that? Absolutely not. So I know that if I do my headspace or mindfulness in the morning, and I do my exercise at least once a day, and I get 8 hours sleep, and I eat XYZ, and I don't drink too much, and blah, and I know that I'm operating, but it's not realistic to live a life like that. And sometimes you need a little bit of a blowout. Sometimes you've got social stuff going on. Sometimes you're a bit under the weather, or you just can't bother. And I think there is a lot of pressure on people, especially like within entrepreneurial circles and just general kind of self-development of people and social media. Everyone thinks that everyone is waking up at 5, journaling, meditating, doing their exercise, doing something like that. And it's just not realistic. So I think allowing yourself times to either feel a bit crappy or times when you don't feel as motivated, and it's all right just to take a little break, reset, crack on. And if you have a day at 50%, so be it. The next one might be 120%, and you take advantage of that. So it's just trying to do that and remain satisfied and happy the best you can as well. Because I think if you're not happy ultimately and you're not satisfied, then it's a case of why are you doing it all? Like, you can have all the money in the world or all the customers in the world or whatever else. There's an element of that, of just trying to get the social in, but being mindful that you do need to make sacrifices at certain places if you want to do so much at once as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's a nice segue into your last challenge, because as your last challenge, you say, sometimes it's difficult to stay hungry. And I think you've already addressed kind of what you do staying in the ideation phase. But now with having so much on in your life, is it a difficult thing to stay hungry? What's the biggest challenge here in motivating yourself?
Yeah, no, it's a good one to touch on. I think when you were speaking about it, then I think it's two things. I think it's staying hungry, and I think it's also dealing with the fact that there's something to lose. Whereas when you first started out, you've got 2 people, maybe a small loan or whatever else it might be, or a few quid that you've put into it yourself. You've got an idea, and if all that goes pop, you've not really lost anything. Whereas I think as you get a little bit further on and you can see the team around you and the people to some degree that you're responsible for, you can see the value that's built in the company. You can see the customers who are using the software or drinking the drink or whatever else it might be. When you do then get to that point and think, actually, there is something tangible to lose now, that is one thing that I think comes into that motivating piece. And it's that kind of like the fear of the loss is sometimes stronger than the desire for the win, and leaning on that to a degree. But I think that does help. It's also a case of, I think I talked about not necessarily liking process and governance and all that stuff as much as the kind of the raw startup piece. But I do think having to lean on process, having to lean on strategy, having to lean on other people around you as well does help with that. And you can, it's a little bit some phrase or comment around almost like, don't worry about being motivated, worry about being disciplined. And if you just keep doing the results will be what they will be. And ultimately, I think it's a case of reassessing what do you want and why are you doing it. And I think if you lose the why, then you do naturally lose the motivation. So if the why was to earn X amount of money per year, or build a company and sell it for X amount, and you have got there, the question does start, you start to ask yourself, well, why am I doing it anymore? So there needs to then be a different why. It might still be financial, it might be bigger numbers that you're looking at, or it might be more aligned with the vision of the company. And like I said, at Titus, that's about empowering people to positively impact the world, and that being our vision that myself and Mike as individuals can get around, but all the rest of the team can get around as well. So looking at the vision and the purpose piece that you're doing, there might be something status related you're pushing towards. So whatever that is, and that'll be different for all individuals, but I think it's constantly reassessing the why. And if that is missing, or you've already achieved it, you've then got to look at, okay, well, what am I doing all of this for? So it's been an interesting one as we've grown, and we have hit targets and exceeded targets in certain places that we ever set out to achieve. And when you get there, there's a part of you that's happy. There's a part of you that's like, oh, like, is that it? And then there's a part of you that's like, what's next? And I think, again, if you're naturally entrepreneurially minded, then you're always looking to I think we probably spoke about on our podcast years ago, but was that entrepreneur's gap. Once you get 95% of the way there, you're naturally then looking at what comes next and what's after that 100% mark. So I think it's a mix of leaning on process, strategy, and allowing things to just kind of keep moving forward. It's asking yourself, what are you doing it all for? And do those still exist? And is the purpose still right?
And maybe in some cases you don't need to be like with Titus, you're in a different phase. As you say, process and governance needs to rule to kind of make it work, because it's already kind of in the next of the next phase. That's what it sounds like. You
and passing on to other people as well, where they might have others that have that hunger and
exactly
accepting you can lean on other people, and you don't need to be the person driving it constantly. I think
and therefore you don't need to kind of have this burning, beautiful, passionate answer to the why when it comes to that, because you basically you've already had your why. Right, rather than, of course, you still need to kind of, you're still in it. It's your baby. You want to make it a success, definitely. But you don't need to kind of, have your why answer always being fully, being fully beautiful poetry, because at the end of the day, it's a business that needs to roll. And as you say, people need to get paid, and this needs to grow. I mean, you can get your whys, the whys that are Seb Francis. You can get them. You can get them elsewhere. It's fine.
Yeah. It's an interesting, like you say, when you look at other people. So we did quite a big piece at Titus on vision and values a while back, and just reassessed where we were, and again looking at the initial values and the initial purpose. Does that still stand? And a lot of what we were looking at was getting that from the team. So not myself and Mike, not the management team, but was pulling out of the team and then writing it in a way that sounded pretty, but ultimately what they had said, and kind of feeding that back. And everyone very quickly got on board with that. And I think the reason why they got on board is because it had come from those guys in the first place. And then that can actually kind of continue. So it's not to say that I think you naturally lose a little bit of that initial hunger, because it does take so much inertia at the beginning to get that momentum. It takes a lot of energy to start pushing a car, but once it's rolling, you can then get it going a little bit easier. That being said, we did do quite a big strategy piece as well a couple of years ago now, 18 months, 2 years ago. And that was like, right, we've got to where we thought we would. What does the next stage look like? And we asked that question honestly as well, and said, are we ready to go again? Like, can we triple again over the next however long? And have we got the energy? Have we got the desire? Have we got the hunger? Have we got the people? Whatever. And the answers to those were yes, and we pushed on and went for it. But I do think people should ask themselves that question. Just because you can grow or can go further doesn't mean you should necessarily. So,
Such wisdom, Seb. Thank you very much. I have the feeling we can talk for hours, but we unfortunately don't have the time. My two very last questions. And I asked them to each and every one of my guests. Sorry, before I get into that, can you please help me finish the following sentence? As a child, I always wanted to become I
think it was a businessman, which I'll reframe to entrepreneur. Yeah. I didn't know what it would look like at the time, but yeah.
Did you have your little briefcase?
I didn't have a briefcase, but I imagined I would do when I was older, and I thought I'd wear a suit, and now I'm pretty much exclusively in black T-shirts. But
which is the new suit? It's a suit for entrepreneurs, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So you're on track.
Yeah, I'm doing all right.
Nice. Yeah, I figured an answer like that from you, because you started right away. I went into it, and I wanted to do this and whatever. So congrats on that. Yeah. So then my two very last questions. Any content, so books or a platform, magazine, whatever, that has inspired you on your journey, that has helped you thrive, that you would recommend to our audience to listen to or read as well?
Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of the classics like your 0 to 1 and those type of books initially, in terms of like the more practical sides of getting places. I'm a huge F1 fan and growing by the day. I think seeing the growth and success of Lewis Hamilton over the years has been quite a nice one. And I think that and we may have even spoken about this on a different platform, but is trying to identify with people who are similar to yourselves. Be that there's often conversations about gender and females in particular roles, be that in sport, in business, in media, whatever it might be, and having people you can look up to with whatever they're doing. And in that case, I'm kind of referring to them as a skin colour comparison. The journey he's had, and Jay-Z quite specifically, again, as someone who's gone media, business and done stuff there, they've been fairly inspirational figures. Both of their kind of books, videos, YouTube documentaries, that kind of stuff have given me a little bit of fire over the years. Did quite a lot of stuff with Virgin Startup in the early days, and obviously the story of Richard Branson is almost folklore from a UK and global entrepreneurship level. But I think it's down to finding individuals who you can resonate with. And I don't know about you, but it's if someone gives you either some advice or an opinion, how I take that on or how I consider that hugely depends on what I think of that other person. So I think it's a case of finding people that you resonate with for whatever that reason may be. And it doesn't have to be in the same line of work and go from there.
So you don't have like one go-to, your entrepreneurial Bible, one thing. It's okay, right? It's just a question.
One that I've lent on a lot over the years is the Mom Test. So the Mom Test is a book which the general concept is, I've got an idea. I go to my mum. I say, Mum, I've got a great idea. She goes, it's a wonderful idea, darling. Like, you should do it. Yeah. Your mum is always going to say yes. So it's how do you avoid the Mom Test, and how do you get proper feedback on an idea? Because I think lots of people have ideas. Some of them are very good and have already been done. Some of them are very good but have got no commercial way of working and they're just not feasible. Some of them are absolutely horrendous, but people can't see it. And there's probably plenty of other options within that as well. So the Mom Test is a really good one for anyone who is at that ideation phase and thinking, I've got an idea, but I'm not sure, one, if it's good, or two, what to do with it. And that's MOM, Mom Test.
MOM. And so it's a book?
Yeah.
Or is it? Okay, great. Well, we'll be sure to look it up and recommend it in our show notes. And then the very last question. Now it's the Seb Francis podcast. And I know you've done Startup Secrets. So you've had many guests. Who was this dream guest that, maybe you've had on your podcast, or maybe you're still looking to interview? Who if it would be your dream guest, who would that be?
Yeah, well, I just gave a little teaser. Jay-Z, without a doubt.
Jay-Z,
So I'm a huge fan of his music. And I've been for quite a long while. But then I think seeing that switch to business, and predominantly business, and he started that with the media side. He's gone into clothing. He's gone into the agency and the management side, gone into champagne, gone into cognac, and I'm sure a whole host of other things that we're just not aware of. And I think broken the mold in lots of different ways. He would be, he's when you have that conversation, who would your 5 guests at dinner be type thing? He's always certainly on that list amongst a few others.
That's a great recommendation. Jay-Z, if you're listening, Seb Francis wants to talk to you. Seb, it has been a pleasure as always. Thank you so much for sharing the entrepreneurial wisdom on Titus as well as ASEAN. We've got loads more on Titus and ASEAN coming in our show notes for those of you who want to know more. Yeah, thank you very much for your time. Seb Francis.
Thank you so much, mate. Great to speak to you.
Likewise.
If you liked this episode, then it would mean the absolute world if you could share it with your friends and or give it a short review on your preferred podcast platform. The more you share your ideas about these interviews, the more people will find out about them. So do let us know what you think. We'd be very, very grateful.
Special thanks to Philip Anderson for our beautiful theme music. This episode was edited by Natalie Piles with production assistance from Genta Metalia.